Hello and welcome to the International Business Environment. Block 1, Unit 2. In this lecture, we are going to discuss on the theories of international trade. Topics to be covered are the neoclassical theories of a trade. In the neoclassical theory of a trade, there are certain subtopics. We are going to discuss on the assumptions of neoclassical model, new trade theory, Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, that is HOS theorem, factor price equalization theorem, Samuelson-Stoppel theorem, and modern theory of a trade. Now, in this session, we were actually going to discuss about the neoclassical trade theory. In the previous session of international trade theory, we actually had a discussion about the Ricardian model. As Ricardian model is basically discussing about the trades between the two different countries have a different, or they are different from the technology terms. Same as the neoclassical theory is basically discussing about that countries are mainly focusing on the endorsements. So as in the Ricardian theory, the whole concept is basically depends upon the technology differences of the two countries. In neoclassical theory, they basically focuses on factor endorsement. Factor endorsement is basically discussing about that company always deal with that product in which they are full-fledged. That means they have a maximum consumption, or we can say that the maximum consumption rate, yet they have extra productions for that product. That is why the factor endorsement is basically the extent to which a company can deal with their resources or endorse the resources. Another is that there are at least two factors in the economy, that is saying labor and capital, which are used in the production of goods. But the two countries have a same technology or a same production function. That means this is again an extra value add in this neoclassical theory of a trade. That is, company have a same production of, and yes, they are having the same factors in production, but they have a different factor endorsement. That means the factor through which they were endorsing their products, they are different. So that is what the extra value add in the neoclassical theory of a trade. Now, what are the various assumptions was taken in the neoclassical model? The very first assumption is a perfect competition. Yes, there is a perfect competition in neoclassical model. Second is the constant return to the scale. That simply state that, for example, if the input, or we can say that the input are increased, the automatically output gonna increase by the double ratio. So that is, they were constant returns to the scale. Another assumption is one good is a labor incentive and the other capital incentive, and the status does not change. That shows the factor endorsement. That is, when the company or a particular company belongs to a country is having a labor incentive technique, so they are good in that. And if another country is good in the capital incentives thing, so they are good in that. Fourth assumption is only goods moves from one country to another, not the factors. Yes, that is just a transfer or a movement of a goods, not of factors. That means if an X country is good in the labor factor, it retains to the X country only. And if goods, or we can say that Y country is good in the capital, so they are related with the capital factors only. The goods is only going to be exchanged. The last assumption is that country has the same technologies to produce X and Y for their factor endorsement difference. So they have similar technologies, but they have another factor endorse differs. The new trade theory. New trade theory is again come up with the same ideas of the neoclassical theory. They basically state that yes, an output expand with the specialization. That means every country is specialized in a particular product, and these things expand the businesses and the output, which help them to increase their the economy of scale, and yes, at the certain level they help them to reduce the unit cost. Again, it is just because of that particular country is ready to serve the needs of the world. Yeah, they are supporting the world demand. In that case, the new theory of a trade was basically stating the country whosoever take the first step to have this kind of practices, or there is no certain barriers to enter in that particular trade, that will relate it to the very good competitive advantage to that particular country. Now, the HOS theorem. This theorem is basically stating that export and import of a particular country is always depends on the availabilities of a factor of a particular country. The country is only going to export those products in which they were intensive in the productions. That means they are very good in the production, they were full-fledged in that particular production. Or we can say that that particular country is abundant with that resources or the factors. Whereas they were going to import only those products in which they were locally scarce. That means there was a scarcity in that particular country local wise. The local market is not full-fledged to serve that particular demand. So in that context, HOS theorem has certain factors to be added on. That is, there must be a free market economy. There must be a free trade. There must be a two country having two goods, having two factors. And yes, factor cannot move between the countries. Yes, that is, there is no transfer of factors. Factor is not going to be transferred. Just say for example, the country X is good in labor. So labor is not going to be moved from one country to another country. Or Y country is good in capital. So capital is not going to be moved into the X country or another country. So that comes into the HOS theorem. Now, we are going to state an example on the HOS theorem. The screen you were seeing is basically stating the country A and country B. As we see that there was no transaction. Country A is full-fledged with the land and have a less amount or a sufficient amount of labor, but they were good in land, whereas company B is good in labor. That means country B is good in the labor intensive technique, country A is good in the capital or the land intensive. So there is a no trade, although they were dealing with the two same product, that is shoes and potatoes. So that is two countries, two goods, two factors. So this is what the example. So initially there is no trade between country A and country B. Now, trade in specialized. That means country A is specialized in making a potato because that particular country is full-fledged with the land. Because it's in a capital and center, so they were good in agriculture and they were making a potatoes in it. Whereas in country B, it is good in the labor, that is labor incentives, and they were good in producing shoes. So now they were exchanging it. So that is what the international trade happened. International market happens. So in this market, they were going to exchange that goods. So country A is going to export the potatoes to B and country B is going to export the shoes to A. So that comes into trade in specialized. Now this is the production possibility frontier of two countries. As we see in a country A, the pre-trade production, that is the red dotted line, is the pre-trade presumption that is extended now. It's a post-trade production. Star is the today's picture and automatically their post-trade consumption is going to be increased. This is red. Green triangle mark is basically stating that there was the extension of a trade consumption. Same happens with the country B. As in that case, the shoes demand is an increase in A. Same wise, the potato demand is going to be increased in country B. We can see the triangle green mark that is shows the new production possibility point for both the countries. Now, the factor price equalization theorem. If we discuss about the factor price equalization theorem, this is basically state that the price effect in the particular countries. As it states the price, that basically state that each country forces the same commodity price. Yes, the same commodity price was there because we initially assumed that technologies are same, all factors are same. So in that case, two goods, two factors of production, yes, each country faces the same commodity price. That is the first factor price equilibrium theorem. Now, in this factor price equilibrium theorem, we were stating an example again with the taking an help of country A and country B. As initial, we will state that without a trade, they were having a restricted payment. Now, A in the actual wage might be twice the annual returns, rent of the acre land. So, we were assuming as A is good in land, the rent is nominal or it may be a minimum. Or we can say that in a B country, labor is cheaper because they were good in labor incentives. So before a trade, a pair of shoes might trade for the 10 for the potato in A, but for only 2 bulbs in the business B. Since the labor is more intensively used in the shoes, so labor rewards relative to the land will be higher in the A. So that shows that automatically the prices was changed between that two countries. So with a trade with the A, it does not have rely on its own scarce labor to make a shoes, but yes, they can have a plentiful land to use that particular potato or make that particular potato. It's same happens in a vice versa term with B. So with that example, the pictures comes at like this. Now in this again we can see that it's a shift in the curve. The pattern of a curve was changed and it's an extension because now the consumption was increased and yes, at the same time demand is obviously going to increase in that case. So that is why it's in a shift. So that comes post-trade production and another is post-trade consumption. Same will happen with the country B in case of potatoes. So if we talk about the Neoclassical theorem, this Neoclassical theory is basically state that it's always about the abundance of your resources. That is how much one country is good in that particular thing. So if country is good in capital, so they were more capital incentive, and they were good in labor, so they were labor incentives. And yes, at the same time, on the basis of this only, country is going to be competitive and yes, going to have a competitive advantage. So that is what all about for the today's session. So thank you so much.